Take a moment to imagine that you're trying to juggle a few balls. At first, you can manage that pretty easily. Those balls, either 1 or 2 or 3 balls, right? You can focus on them, you know where they're at, and you can keep them up in the air. But then slowly, as people add more things to the mix, add more balls, or maybe something like a flaming torch, when those additional things get added, that strains you a little bit more, and it gets harder and harder for you to keep everything going. Eventually, everything collapses. You drop all the balls, and you have to restart. And that is exactly what neuro-burnout feels like. It feels like having so many things going on that you just cannot anymore. You just can't keep the balls going. Now, I think I invented that term, neuro-burnout, but I really wanted to have a term that encapsulated all of the ways in which neurodivergent people and even neurotypical people can experience and feel burnout. I've seen several studies or articles about ADHD burnout and autism burnout, and I want to talk about those together in this video. What we're going to do in this video is learn a little bit about neuro-burnout and how to identify it. So I'm going to talk about a few things, a few big signs that someone might be experiencing this neuro-burnout, and give you some personal examples about the times I felt burnt out. Often confused with laziness, neuro-burnout or burnout is much more than just feeling a little tired or being a little lazy. It is the intense physical, mental, and emotional fatigue that people can experience. And one professor, Dr. Dora Raymaker, an assistant professor at Portland State University, talked about it this way. Burnout is characterized by pervasive, long-term, typically 3 or more months of exhaustion and loss of our executive function. Literally our brain just is not working anymore. Our brain literally cannot function the way that it normally did if we're experiencing burnout. So it's not just about being lazy, but it's about our brain not being able to do the work that it needs to get done to finish tasks. I also wanted to read another quote by Dr. Raymaker because I really resonated with it and how it describes burnout in general. Raymaker says, "Burnout is a state of physical and mental fatigue, heightened stress, and diminished capacity to manage life skills, sensory input, and or social interactions, which comes from years of being severely overtaxed by the strain of trying to live up to demands that are out of sync with our needs." And now I really resonated with that definition for a few reasons. First, it's very descriptive. It says a lot of different things that we might be experiencing. It might be stress, it might be fatigue, it just is this diminished capacity to do things. But it doesn't say that this individual is lazy. It doesn't say that people who are experiencing burnout are flawed. Instead, it points to the social norms or the systems that we live in and how they affect us. It says that it is people trying to live in these systems where our needs are not being met that lead to this type of burnout. And so, for example, burnout for an autistic individual might be that they are doing all of this work to try to fit in with social norms. They're trying to mirror neurotypical people's behavior, and that is an exhausting, draining process, and that can lead to burnout. And so it's trying to achieve that social norm that causes the burnout, not a flaw of the individual. And so burnout occurs when the demands of life, the demands of our work, the demands of our school, the demands of our relationship all start to become too much. It is when we start to juggle too many balls that we experience this burnout. And that act of juggling too many things depletes our brain's ability to focus, stay organized, and regulate our emotions. And so what does neuroburnout look like exactly? Well, it varies based off the type of neurodivergence that a person has, but typically we can identify a few things that are signs that burnout is occurring or that you are feeling burnt out. And the first big sign is just that extreme exhaustion or that extreme tiredness, that feeling that you cannot motivate yourself to do anything no matter what you are trying to do. No amount of chocolate is going to get you out of bed to complete the task that you are trying to complete. Oftentimes, folks who are neurodivergent really need stimulation, and it is really hard for people who are neurodivergent sometimes to say no to things. And so, right, if a new adventure comes our way or a new opportunity comes our way, we really want to do that. We become excited about this new thing, this new stimulation that we can experience, and we often say yes. But that eventually leads to overcommitment as we say yes and yes and yes to new adventures, new tasks, new opportunities. We become overcommitted, and then we become overworked and exhausted. That overcommitment, that saying yes to too many things, drains our mental resources until we are just exhausted. And that leads to the second sign that we might be experiencing burnout, which is decision fatigue. Now, if you are struggling to decide what you want to eat for breakfast or what you want to eat for dinner, that is a good sign that you are experiencing decision fatigue. We need mental resources to make decisions, and so when that resource is tapped, even really easy decisions like, do I want to have a grilled cheese or a peanut butter, become difficult for us to make. And when we struggle to make decisions, we don't act. And when we don't act, that inaction compounds the problem because we are no longer acting to complete the things on our checklist, and so we start to feel more overwhelmed and thus exhausted. Another sign that someone might be experiencing burnout is brain fog. For me, brain fog often is the inability to remember things or to remember what words I wanted to say. I'll sit there for a minute trying to think of a simple word that I normally would know exactly what to say in that exact instance. And so when we're feeling burnout, our brain just feels like it's acting more slowly. It's like there's a cloud in our brain that is preventing us from thinking quickly. And so when we are experiencing brain fog, we're just not able to complete tasks in the way that we normally would be able to. And finally, another big sign of burnout is emotional regulation, or the inability to regulate our emotions the way that we normally would do. Burnout really does tax us, and it makes it much more difficult for us to be able to focus on our emotions and our impulses and logically work through things. It becomes much more difficult for us to rein in feelings of anger, frustration, sadness, depression, disgust, and even our impulse control becomes a little weakened or a little harder for us to control the impulses. So we might start impulse buying a little bit more if we are burnt out. So if you suspect that you might be burnt out, take a moment to ask yourself 2 questions. Am I functioning the way that I normally function, or am I feeling like I'm not able to do what I normally do? And second, ask yourself, how long have I been experiencing this? Has it been just for a day, 2 days, a week, months? And the longer that you've been experiencing these things, the more likely it is that you're burnt out and need some assistance. And so while awareness is a critical first step to addressing burnout, we can and should start developing skills that will allow us to navigate this exhaustion, this fatigue, and the burnout that we experience. And that's what we're going to talk about in our next video, so I encourage you to watch it. And if you learned something from this video, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel to support all that we are doing to try to raise awareness about and cultivate skills in the areas of neurodivergence, productivity, schoolwork, and life.